and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to cover the Barbarian's Path of Wild Magic class specialization from Tasha's Guide to Everything, providing a brief description of the subclass, as well as explain and set up the various features gained. The Barbarians of this class have become so in tune with the weave of magic that they have essentially been bathed in magical energy, allowing them to sense various forms of magic and trigger very wild effects during a rage. Many Feywild races choose to take this path when they select the Barbarian class, as it complements their love of magic and emotion, all in one subclass. These Barbarians, as a result, tend to react at an emotional level and can sometimes trigger unexpected magical effects during combat. But unlike a Wild Mage, their reactions are generally only when their life is in danger, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on. As this video will only be focusing on the Path of Wild Magic subclass, I have provided a link to the previous video where I created a Barbarian class character in the description below. And as usual, a Barbarian chooses their path when they reach level 3. So let's apply that to our character now so that we can trigger the correct selection. There we go. The first feature that your character is going to gain is called Magic Awareness, and this happens at level 3 as soon as you select your class specialization. And it works much like a Locate Object spell, but with a few limitations. Your character can use this as an action during combat, and it will allow them to locate things like spells or magical items that are not behind total cover. For example, they could theoretically sense a trap that happens to be laid on the surface of a floor or a wall or on a door handle, but not if that magical spell or effect is behind a panel that is classified as total cover. The detection aspect of this feature works as soon as you activate the feature itself and continues until the end of your next turn. And if a spell has been detected, your character will essentially know what school that spell belongs to, but won't know what the actual spell was. And there is a usage limitation in that your character can only make use of this particular feature a number of times equal to your character's proficiency bonus, so we'll need to make sure that we add this to our character sheet in order to track it. So let's go ahead and simply drag this into place, and I'm going to create a new power group called Path of Wild Magic. Excellent. All right, so that's going to drop that down to here, and we need to set it up to our proficiency bonus. In this case, it's 2. So we will have 2 uses right off, and that will get more and more as our character gains proficiency bonuses. And the last thing that I would like to point out is that there is a distance as to how far this particular spell will reach, and that is a total of 60 feet from where your character is currently standing, and as long as that spell or magical object isn't protected by something that would be classified as total cover, you will be able to sense it. As for its uses, all you would really need to do is indicate to the Dungeon Master, I'm making use of this magical awareness capability, what's within 60 feet that isn't behind total cover. And that's it. They'll have to do a little bit of digging around, but they will essentially be able to identify or point out where things generally are, even though you won't necessarily be able to see exactly what it is. Also at level 3, your character is going to gain the Wild Surge feature, which allows your character to essentially trigger a random wild magic effect at the time that they enter rage. The effect of that wild magic is triggered at the start of your rage, and if a spell effect is reusable, it will only be reusable while your character actually remains in an enraged state. Now, there is a wild magic table that has specifically been set up for the Barbarian. It is not the same table that has been created for the Wild Mage Sorcerer, so there are differences that come into play. To make use of the table, what you would do is simply roll on it. And that effect would apply, and the Dungeon Master might have to make some changes to make sure the effect comes into play, or you as a character might want to go through and double check each of these tables, because there are entries in the table rather, because they don't change, they're the same, and make some convenience entries on the Actions tab through Wild Surge entry point here. And we're going to go ahead and do some of that. So let's go ahead and set this up. Now, we're going to want to make sure that we do this slightly differently. We're not going to be including this into the Path of the Wild Magic section here. We're going to drop this into place. Where did that go? Hello. There we go. Not sure why that worked. And then I'm going to create a new group called Wild Magic or Wild Surge. And what this is going to do is it's going to create an entirely different power group. I'm also going to set up the ability to be Constitution because that's what the bulk of them are. And it's going to be proficiency bonuses. And I'm just going to make sure that this is all set for Constitution. That way, any feature that we add here will already go through and have an appropriate stat set up for us. We don't need to worry about that. I'm now going to pop this open, and I'm going to start here with the first shadowy tendril effect, if you will. I'm going to rename this to be Shadowy Tendril. Now, every creature or target of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or take 1d12 necrotic damage. You yourself also gain 1d12 temporary hit points. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we need to do here. We need to create a saving throw, we need to set up the damage, and the temporary hit points. So that's 3 effects. The first is going to be the cast. That is going to be the actual saving throw requirement. The next is going to be damage. We can just simply do that. And the last is going to be a heal. So let's first set up the saving throw. This is going to be, that's an attack. We don't want that. We want the save. We want this to be a Constitution saving throw. So let's set that to Con. And we can actually leave this as the base group DC because we've already got all the Constitution settings configured here. And this will automatically calculate and improve as our character levels up. And it is not half damage. So we do not, this will be magic because it is a magical effect. And it will not be a half damage effect here. So we need to make sure that that is there. Done. Next, we need to set up the damage. And it is 1d12. So we add a new type, select the d12, drop it into place, and this will be necrotic damage. So necrotic. Okay, and that's that. Now for the healing, we want to set this as self. It'll be temporary hit points, and it will be a 1d12 as well. And that's all we have to do. Now, how this gets used is going to be as follows. During combat, let's say that our character is now entering rage. So I'm going to say rage is coming into play. And let's just, for kicks, say that Shadowy Tendril was the roll we got. I'm now going to choose 3 targets. Let's see, each creature within 30 feet. So there's no limit to the number of targets. So let's say I decide to target the succubus, the adult dragon, and the bugbear chief, just for examples. I would now roll their saving throws. We had 2 failures and the dragon succeeded. So clicking the damage here is only going to apply the damage to those who failed. The dragon, because they succeeded, was essentially automatically untargeted. And you can see that here in your combat tracker. I'm going to roll the damage. I'm going to roll once and apply 10 points of damage to both of them. I am then going to roll the heal and apply 11 points to my character, as we can see here. And that's how you would make use of that. The next Wild Surge option that could kick up is this teleportation capability, where it will allow your character to jump 30 feet away to an area where they can see. And this is repeatable, meaning that you can continue to use it each turn if you wish, while your rage remains in place. So let's go ahead and pop this feature open here, or this ability here. And the reason I'm doing that is if I drop this into place, it's going to automatically drop it into the Wild Surge group. So it would simplify having to figure out how to get it into a group here. I'm going to rename this to teleportation. And I'm going to get rid of each of these action effects on that particular feature. I am then going to add a new effect, and this is really going to be an indicator to you that as long as your rage lasts, this effect will be there. Teleportation, yeah, okay. So this will be Wild Surge, Teleportation, semicolon, and that's all I'm going to put there. Because it's really just an indicator. It's kind of like a fake effect. And it's going to be on your own character. And how that's going to work is as follows. Let's say, for example, that you triggered rage. And because this is going to be triggered at the start of your rage, the duration is going to align with rage. So I think it's 1 minute. So I'm going to apply the effect, and let's say that I tick rage. So the effect is now into place. And for the next 10 turns, your character can essentially jump to any unoccupied space that they can see as a bonus action. That's really nice. Although generally, when you trigger the Wild Surge effect, some DMs will require the Barbarian to do the first teleportation as part of that process. And then from then on, it becomes something that they can choose as a bonus action. I'm a little bit on the fence. Doesn't really matter to me. But now, for the next 10 turns, this capability is there, and then when you're on a map, you would just simply jump your character around. And that's it. The third effect will essentially summon a spirit-based creature, so whether it's a flump or pixie, it doesn't really matter, it's your choice. And it will appear within 5 feet of a creature that your character can see and have chosen as the target where it's going to spawn next to. At the end of the current turn, so in the sense of a combat tracker, it would be after the gas spore goes, that creature, or that flump or pixie, that is a tongue twister, is going to explode, and any creature within 5 feet of it will have to succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 1d6 force damage. And you can move or resummon another spirit each time. So actually, you can't move, sorry. I apologize for that. You can resummon another spirit and place it next to another target. And it is a bonus action, which means you can always do your own actions and then summon this thing. That way, it's just sort of like a ticking time bomb, if you will. So as you can see, definitely something we want to add to our combat tracker. So I'm going to make use of this feature again. And I'm going to call this Intangible Spirit. Now, in this case, it's going to be a dexterity saving throw. So I'm going to modify this saving throw and simply change it to dexterity. There we go. As for damage, we can get rid of the healing action, but there's still the damage component. So we can modify this. We can clear this dice here and drop a 1d6 into place. And then it will be force damage. And update this to force damage. And there. So now, as a bonus action, all you have to do is click this to tell the Dungeon Master that you've summoned one. And then at the end of the turn, the targets that your character has selected, so in this case we have let's add the couple of flying swords in there. We can go and roll the saving throw on it. And unfortunately, they all succeeded, so there won't be any force damage that comes into play. So the fourth magical effect that could happen is something that would end up infusing one of your weapons of your choice that you're currently holding with a magic capability, in the sense that it will change its damage type to force, as well as gain the light and thrown properties. And its range will be about 20 feet as its minimum range, or normal range, I should say, and 60 feet as its maximum range. Lastly, if you throw that weapon and it is no longer in your hands, it will return to you at the end of the turn automatically, kind of like Wolfgar's hammer can in the Driz series of books. Now, the issue is there isn't an effect that we can do for this. What we're going to need to do is temporarily add a new weapon, and you do that by going add weapon, and you'll create a dummy weapon down here, for example. We then want to go ahead and quickly modify this Morningstar. Let's say I chose that as the object. I'm going to call this imbued. just so that it's slightly different from the other one. It's going to receive your strength plus your proficiency bonus as the damage, or for the attack. And it's also going to use the 1d8 plus that, and it's going to be force damage. For the other benefit of the range, it's just best to simply simulate it and make it a ranged, or a thrown weapon rather. Now, when you make the attack roll, actually in that case, technically thrown could be dexterity as well, but this will work for now. And then you would make your damage roll if you hit. And that's how that would work. Once the quote-unquote imbued weapon went away, you could set this as not carried and then just simply go through and make use of this. Because if this effect comes up again and you choose the Morning Star again in the future, you just want to have it equipped so that you can actually make use of this feature again. It's not the cleanest way to do it. I am actually not really happy with this, and you'll want to set the ammunition as 1 in the event that it's this, because if you throw it, the minute you do, oops, hang on. The minute you do, it'll tag as being used. Now you can track the ability of picking it back up. Now you've thrown it, you picked it back up, now you've thrown it, that kind of thing. So it returns at the end of your turn. And it's a bit clunky, but I haven't really found a better way to do this. Now the 5th magical effect is that whenever a creature hits you with an attack roll before your rage ends, that creature will take 1d6 of force damage in retaliation. Definitely something we're going to want to add to our actions tab here. I'm going to scroll down, drop this into place, and I'm going to call this Retribution. There is no saving throw that comes into play. And there is no heal that comes into play. It's just going to simply be 1d6 of force damage. So I'm going to clear that, drop a d6 in there, and change this to force. And that way, whenever they hit you, you just pink, and then they take 2 points of damage. You have to make sure that they're targeted, or if you roll it, you then have to make sure that you drag and drop that onto their icon here or somewhere on here so that they take that damage. But that's all you really have to do. If you already have them targeted, you just click it. And that's it. The 6th magical effect is essentially that once the effect is triggered, you are now surrounded by this ball of multicolored light. While that exists, i.e. while your rage remains active, you will gain a +1 bonus to your armor class, and anyone within 10 feet of your character will also gain that same bonus. So let's go ahead and add this to our actions tab. It's going to create another shadowy tendril. I'm going to call this Light Sphere, just for kicks. I'm going to delete these 3 effects because we don't need them. I'm going to create a new one, and it is going to be an actual effect. So Light Sphere, here we go. Wild Surge, Light Sphere, semicolon AC colon 1. It's going to last for 1 minute, and it's going to be on everybody, and it doesn't go away until the end of that 1 minute period. Now, the way this is going to work is that, let's say that this was the effect that got triggered. I'm going to clear out this effect just for clarity. And let's say the wolf and the ape were also within 10 feet of my character. All 3 of us, including our own character, will end up gaining this effect. So you can drag that onto any creature within 10 feet of you, and as long as they stay within 10 feet of you, they will gain a +1 to their armor class. If I switch over to the Dungeon Master screen for a brief moment, and let's say set up the Ifrit, who happens to have nobody targeted, so I will have them target the Barbarian. Whenever there's an attack roll that is made, not sure why it rolled twice, but anyway, Oh, that's because they have the ape targeted as well. Anyway, you'll see that there's the defense effect tag here, and that tells me that the AC bonus is working. As long as the rage lasts, this effect will remain in place. If, however, your character is knocked unconscious, your character is killed outright, your rage drops because you hadn't taken any hits for a certain period of time, or you willed it away, then all of this will go away. So you'll have to keep that in mind. But that sets up item number 6 there. The 7th effect that could come into play really isn't something we need to add to our actions tab. But what it will do is create this sphere of vines that will grow around you for 15 feet in all directions. So a 30-foot radius, I believe. And while any creature that is hostile to you moves about within that location, it will be difficult terrain for them, meaning that they will only be able to move at half their normal speed. So if a character happens to have a 30-foot movement, they can only move 15 feet. So if they moved, let's say, 20 feet outside of that radius of the vines, and then they had 10 feet of movement left, they would only be able to move 5 feet once they got within the boundary of where those vines were. So they still would have 10 feet of distance between you and where they are currently standing. And the last magical effect that could actually occur is that a bolt of light will shoot from your chest, and a target that you designate, who happens to be within 30 feet of your character that you can see, will have to make a Constitution saving throw or suffer 1d6 radiant damage and be blinded. That blindness will remain in place until the end of your turn. Sorry, the start of your next turn, I apologize. And each turn thereafter, you'll be able to reuse this effect on another creature if you wish. So it is definitely something we'll want to be able to add to our actions tab because there's multiple uses in play. So this should be the last time that we need to copy this effect, so I'll just get rid of that. I'm going to call this Radiant Bolt. I'm going to remove, no, we need the saving throw. We don't need the healing, and then I'm just going to modify these. So they will have to make a Constitution saving throw, so we don't need to adjust that. But it should have, there we go. We might just have to flip that around to enforce the stat to update. And it's 1d6 radiant damage. So I'm going to delete this dice, clear that die, drop a 1d6 into place. And now it'll be 1d, oops, no, it'll be radiant. There we go. And that sets everything up for it. So now, let's say that our Barbarian is the one that has the action token again. And you triggered Rage. This Radiant Bolt got rolled, so now it is something that you can use. Well, I'm going to, and it is a single creature, so another creature of your choice. So yeah, it's one creature, so you can't do this on multiple targets. You can only do it on one. I'm going to get rid of that, clear that, and clear this. So I'm going to target this white, because they might be weak to radiant damage. And I'm going to have that white roll the saving throw. In this case, they succeeded. I kind of want to see what happens if they fail. So give me a second. Okay, that's a failure. Now I'm going to roll this 1d6 radiant damage, and let's see what happens. Okay, so they're not weak to it. But it will do the 1d6 points of damage to the target in question. Next turn comes around. Oh, right, I forgot. We have to add a blind effect. So let's go back into here and add a new effect. It will be called Wild Surge, Radiant Bolt, semicolon, and I believe it is just blind. It might be blindness. Let me confirm that. It is neither. It is blinded. And it will last for 1 round and remain in place until the start of your turn. So now we have to apply the blindness effect to the white. Now when they make an attack, they're going to have disadvantage. I'm going to push turn around here. So let's monitor the effect for blindness there. Still in place. All right. And the white has now lost it. So technically that didn't work the way that we wanted it to. Interesting. So it ended at the turn. 1 second. Well, that's the only option, so we'll have to live with that. But it essentially does what we need it to do for the time being. So I just realized the effect actually went away as soon as the turn itself ended. I haven't seen that behavior before. So if you notice that that happens, you'll probably just want to do that. And then in theory, it would be in place until your turn came around, but it isn't. It's sticking around to the end. It's actually supposed to be until your turn ends or starts, not the other way around. So it shouldn't be going away at the start of the round. That might be a bug with Fantasy Grounds right now. Maybe they've changed the definition of that and haven't really clarified that. I'll take a look at that, but for now, that's the best that we can do. But that goes ahead and sets up everything that we need to do when it comes to Wild Surge. At level 6, your character will gain access to the Bolstering magic feature, giving a bit of a boost to anyone your character touches during an action round, including yourself. This means your character can touch someone in your party, any friendly creature, or your own character to give them that boost. And there are 2 choices that your character has in relation to what this boost is. The first is that you can enhance someone's attack or ability check rolls and add a D3 roll to that total. This effect will last for 10 minutes before it wears off, and the effect only goes away when the 10 minutes has passed, meaning that any attack or ability check made in that 10-minute period is affected. The second option is to give them the ability to roll a D3 and regain an expended spell slot equal to or lower than the value that was rolled. However, this is a once per long rest use on that creature, meaning that if you provided a wizard in your party the means to roll this dice, and they chose to return a level 3 spell slot because they rolled a 3, they can't receive it again until they themselves have completed a long rest. And your character does have a limited number of uses available to them that is equal to their proficiency bonus before they themselves must take a long rest to regain those uses. So, there are a couple of things that we'll want to go ahead and do. First, we're going to want to drag this into our Actions tab and move it into the power group associated with the Path of Wild Magic. In this case, we have a proficiency bonus of 3 at this point, so we do need to modify this guy. And now set that at 3. And there are 2 effects that will want to come into play here. Let's see, let's add this effect, and I don't know if we want to have the second one to be an effect now that I think about it, but let's set up this one here. We're going to open this up. We're going to call this Bolstering Magic. Semicolon. And ATK colon 1D3 semicolon. And check is going to be 1D3. It will last for 10 minutes. And it will be on the target, and it will not expire at all. It will expire only after that 10-minute period is gone. So, the way that this would work is as follows. Let's say that we decided to add this capability to the ape. So, I'm going to drop this effect onto the ape. I'm going to set it up so that they go. Now, let's say that they have to make an attack roll. Well, you'll notice that a d6 is rolled. That's what that lower die is. But it rolled a 2. The die itself actually rolled a 5, but because it rounds down, it gave us a +2 bonus. which gave us a total of 20 for our attack roll, hence why we hit. The same thing will happen if you have to make an ability check. So let's say this creature had to make a strength check. You'll see that there's also a d6 that gets rolled. In this particular case, they rolled a 1. Yeah. And as a result, they have now managed to gain a check roll of 7, which means that they would have still failed whatever it was that they were actually trying to roll against. So to help clear this up, I have gone ahead and added the effect to our own character. Now, this white is still blinded. That means that there is going to be an advantage roll that comes into play here. So I'm going to make an attack roll on the white. And you'll see that there's a d6. It's buried underneath that d20 there. So we had 2 d20 that were rolled because it was an advantage die, but we also had the bonus die rolled. And because we've told it it's a 1d3, the maximum value that you can get here is going to be a 3. Now that works for the attacks. What about an actual skill check? Well, if I make a skill check roll, you'll see that the d20 was rolled, so was the d6. And again, we got maximum results off of that. If I continue to roll that, we will never see a value higher than 3. Because the way it works is it will roll the d6 and simply divide by 2. And excellent. That is working the way that we want it to. As for this option here, there really isn't a need to add this to the feature on our Actions tab. You just simply tell the player that you're giving this to roll a d3. And to do that, all they will have to do is right-click on the d6, select Custom Dice, and right here is the d3 option. They select that and then roll it. And that will act as a d3. You can see that here. And this means that they will be able to return a level 1 spell slot. But that does set everything up for bolstering magic. So let's move on to the next feature. At level 10, your character will gain the Unstable Backlash feature, giving your character a reaction that can make use of the wild magic table to trigger random effects. Now you can see why I went ahead and set up an actual wild surge grouping here so that we don't have to worry about creating one every single time we trigger a wild effect. As long as your character is enraged and they are hit with an attack or have failed a saving throw, they can use their reaction to lash out in response. This is where your character is essentially reacting because of their emotional state to being hit. The choice itself is going to be yours as to whether you actually do use the reaction for this or not. But keep in mind, if you do choose to use this reaction, you will lose the ability to make any attacks of opportunity or trigger other reactions because of it, because reactions only are 1 per round. Now, if your character already has an effect in play because they had entered rage and it's one of the ones that is continuous, then this new effect would replace the active one. So let's say, for example, in relation to the Wild Surge, that we had this teleportation feature already in place. And then all of a sudden, during our reaction, we got Intangible Spirit. Well, Intangible Spirit is now the one that would be active. The teleportation effect goes away. And the only thing I would suggest is to ensure that there is a record to the Dungeon Master that you did in fact use Unstable Backlash. I would simply add it to the power group in question. So in this case, it would be Path of Wild Magic. And that's just to indicate in the chat log that you're making use of this reaction. At level 14, your character will gain the last feature of the subclass called Controlled Surge. And it gives your character the ability to roll twice against the wild magic table and then choose the effect you want to activate. If, however, the same number is rolled on both dice, then the roll can be ignored, and you can choose an effect from the table that you want. So what that means is as follows. Let's pop open this table here. Let's say that I roll twice. And let's say that in both of these cases, I got the 8. Well, if you happen to roll 8 twice, you don't make use of the 8th option here unless you want to. You get to choose any of the effects that are here. So maybe I wanted Intangible Spirit instead. I could go ahead and choose that. But with this, I now have an option between the 8 and the 6. So because I didn't roll the same number twice, I get to choose which of these two effects I want to actually make use of. So let's see. I think I'm going to go with 8 in this particular case. The AC bonus is nice, but I want the damage for this particular example. And that's how that would come into play. And then while you're continuing to make use of the effect until it's replaced by another effect, you would continue to make use of, in this case, the Radiant Bolt option that you have here. And if we set this up so that it's in the action and combat mode, if you will, and minimize everything, you will see how much cleaner this now looks, and all of the effects are right here that you can make use of. And here's the thing. This applies to both as your character is entering rage and if they're making use of the wild magic table during a reaction. You get to roll twice and then choose the effect. That is absolutely massively powerful capability. But that now brings us to the end of all of the features that this particular character is going to gain. The only thing I will suggest is you'll want to keep an eye on any uses and make sure that they stay aligned with the number of proficiency bonuses that you have, or bonus points that you have. So in this case, this should now be 5 uses for each of these two here. Beyond that, it's a relatively straightforward class to continue to use, and the Path of the Wild Magic connects the Barbarian's rage feature almost directly into their emotional state during combat. And as the character levels up, you can see that those capabilities become much, much more powerful. I'd be very interested to actually see one of these classes played, maybe even play one myself, because I feel the randomness of the effects could make this a very unpredictable character to play. However, this does bring us to the end of this particular video. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.